morning, lady. Are you giving the speaker his notes? Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Change Now 2026, and welcome to this very first panel at the collective stage. I'm very happy you all came here for this session on internal transformation, employee engagement, and sustainability as an organizational DNA. I might be a bit biased, but I think this is the best session to start your day with because it's essential for the sustainability transition that we're in currently. So I'm actually really interested. It's actually my very first time at Change Now, but I'm also curious who is here for the first time, just like me. Who is here for the first time? Ooh, that's a lot of people. Welcome. I think it's around 17% that's here for the very first time. Who has been here more than 3 times? Okay, we have some veterans in the room as well. Welcome back. My name is Bodien van Stierum. I have the honor of hosting this session for you today. I help event organizers like Change Now to create interesting programs and I would say non-boring conversations. And I also help sustainability managers increase their employee engagement around sustainability. So I hope today here's also some sustainability professionals that will get some practical approaches to really embed sustainability in the DNA of their company. So as we walk around here, we see there's no shortage of solutions, but it's actually the challenge of how can we make them part of how organizations operate. Transformation doesn't happen in slide decks, in KPIs. They happen through people. They happen through how we collaborate within organizations, how we think, how we make decisions, and how we measure success. So today we'll explore what is needed to go from ambition to action. How we can engage employees, how we can empower intrapreneurs. You will learn what an intrapreneur is. And you will also see how sustainability can be something we define success through and how we can make our decision through that lens. To start off this session, really giving us more of a meta context, will be Otto Scharmer. He is senior lecturer at MIT. He's co-founder of the Presenting Institute, and he's author of Theory U. I'm curious, who in the room read the book Theory U or knows about Theory U? Okay, I think around 20%. Otto will show us how results within companies are embedded in how we listen to each other, how we collaborate, and he calls it social soil. So how we work together really defines our success of embedding sustainability within organizations. He obviously knows way more than I do about this topic, so I'll let him introduce it and open this session. A very warm applause for Otto Scharmer.
Good morning, everyone. So thank you very much, Bodien, for the introduction. I'm going to set the stage for the conversation we are going to have this morning around kind of the internal and organizational transformation. Just with a little bit of backdrop on where we are in the movement of organizational learning and change, and where we are in the movement of systems thinking. So we all heard, probably most of us, the introductory session, right? The backdrop, where we are from the viewpoint of systems thinking. And we all know we live in an era of rupture, not transition. We live in an era of fracture, not fragmentation. And we also live in an era of beginning profound renewal. And what we heard in the introductory session is the bigger backdrop of the planetary situation we are in. And when you look at the current situation through the viewpoint of systems thinking, here's what we see. We collectively create results that pretty much no one wants. What are these results? They are like the symptoms of the poly crisis are: 1, the environmental, 7 of 9 planetary boundaries crossed. We also heard in the introductory session about fragmentation, polarization, and war. And of course, then there is the inner divide, which is the pandemic of mental health, the collective sense of depression that we face in many situations. And that one way of describing is in terms of deal with the illusion of insignificance, the feeling that all these problems that we face, that's so big, whatever I do or can't do doesn't make any difference on that. 2 numbers on that: 69% of people have reported about a significant loss of agency. 2 out of 3 people worldwide say, what happens in my institution, what happens in my community has nothing to do with my own voice. And yet, pretty much the same number of people also say, I want to be part of a positive change story. I would be willing to sacrifice part of my personal income to combat climate change. And when you look at these 2 numbers, that's in a nutshell the challenge we face in organizations. There is an abundance of positive personal intention, and yet collectively there's this feeling whatever happens around me has nothing to do with what I want to see. That is the face of collective leadership failure today. That's the challenge that we all face. So let me double click on that, and I want to give you 3 numbers that we want to keep in mind as the backdrop of this conversation here this morning. The first one you very likely already know: 70%. 70% of organizational transformations fail, right? That has been often reported, and we all know the examples of that. Imagine a company that is rolling out a product that 7 out of 10 times is failing, right? Imagine what we would do. But this is what we do as leaders. This is what we do in the leadership of change. Now, so let's double click on that one. The second number is 6% of US workers strongly agree with 4 key items predictive of effective change management. 1, the supervisor actively supports the changes. 2, communication is open across all levels. 3, they are asked for input. And lastly, leaders help them to see how the changes shape the future. So the last number is about these 4 items. When these 4 conditions are met, 77% of employees are engaged. When these conditions are not met, 1% of employees are engaged. So it really boils down to these 4 very simple, straightforward things. Whether we can meet the conditions for that to be in place. Now, what does that mean from a systems thinking perspective? It means that most of organizational change is dealing with the top level, the symptoms level, right? We address one gap or the other. And all the changes we really, we usually do is to taking out costs, to streamline processes, and maybe kind of merging kind of 2 units into one or something structural, right, on a big picture. What is it? So there is kind of the deficit mindset in most of our organizational change initiatives, closing the gap, and the changes are kind of limited to structures and processes. What we are missing is the 2 deeper levels of organizational change, which really deal with the deeper mindsets and the deeper sources, right? Sources of our identity, of our creativity, but also sources of our story of the future that we feel perhaps being part of or not being part of. What we have learned in the field of deep change at the Presencing Institute over the past 2+ decades, the past 25 years, are these 4 things that essentially deal with the interplay among all 4 levels you see here. 1, you cannot change a system unless you transform consciousness, which means you cannot change a system unless you transform the mindsets of the people who are enacting that system. So you need to address all 4 of these levels. 2, you cannot transform consciousness unless you make a system see and sense itself. You need to create an environment where you look into the mirror, where you look at what you see in terms of the outcomes you don't want to see as a result of your own behavior, kind of these reflective environments. 3, you cannot actualize the future unless you're sensing and embodying the change. Be the change you want to see, right? We know that term. So as a leader, we need to not only feel the future, but we need to embody it to a degree that it really radiates into our teams. And lastly, you cannot do any of these things unless you create support structures that offer tools, practices, and holding spaces. That is really the #1 learning from change management. All leaders can change you what change they want to see, but what they often don't know is the support structure that they need to provide for these behavioral changes to really occur. And this is all about spaces, tools, and practices. So perhaps the most important thing that I learned over the years from innovators is this. There are 2 sources of learning and leadership. One is the past, and the other one is the future, the emerging future. And pretty much all our organizational processes, organizational learning processes, and educational processes are based on the first source of learning, the past. Yet, when we deal with disruption, when we deal with the leadership situations we all face today in our organizations, we need to tap into this other source. And that really became my quest. And what I learned is, and what I mean with emerging future is a possibility that looks at me, that looks at us, because it depends on us to manifest. It's kind of that sense of a possibility that needs my own agency to actually be realized, which is really at the source of all great entrepreneurship. So what I learned, how that works is, it takes a journey that moves us beyond the usual mental frameworks, right? Downloading the existing frames and taking us through a journey of basically 3 stages: observe, 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 deepening our observation capacities, accessing a deeper source of stillness, right? Deep sensing, something we call presencing, and then exploring new possibilities by doing. Today, I would summarize this same process with just 3 words: attention, intention, and agency. Attention. If truly deepened, the way we are present and attending to what's happening around us, if truly deepened, allows us to connect with intention, with the deeper sense of the story of the future that we want to be part of. And intention, if why we are here, the sense of why we are here, if truly clarified, begins to catalyze agency. That's really what I learned. And what that means is that there is an inner dimension of leadership that in most change efforts today is missing. And I stumbled into that by, talking with leaders like this one here, Bill O'Brien, and he told me, reflecting on all his experiences, that the success of an intervention depends on the interior condition of the intervener. So he basically says, the success of what we do depends on the inner place from that we operate. And when I heard that, I realized he wasn't just talking about what leaders do or how they do it, but about the inner place from which they operate. And today, I would describe this inner place with these three conditions: open will, open mind, and open heart. And so, in other words, our capacity to access curiosity, to access empathy, and to access courage. And of course, what we all know is, very often, these conditions are not met, right? So what we have been seeing over the past 10 years is an institutional wall where we see a lot of the opposite. A closing reaction, a freeze reaction of the mind, heart, will, AKA an amplification of ignorance, hate, and fear. We see those patterns of denial, of desensing, and of absencing, both in business models, right, and also in geopolitics, playing out as we speak. So what I'm basically saying is, when disruption happens, we have a choice as leaders. We can respond by turning towards, or we can respond by turning away and closing down, or by opening up and turning towards. When we close down and turn away, we activate one kind of process that by now we all know very well. And when we turn toward and open up, we activate another kind of process that, through our own experiences, we also know very well. And the first one is really organized on a pattern of an architecture of separation, right? Which is kind of all the walls are going up, and that's kind of the wall of rupture and fracture. And the second one, which is also real for many of us, is based on an architecture of connection that is operating on opening the mind, the heart, the will, kind of doing this inner kind of leadership work. And yet, we as leaders today are part of both of these walls. We lead in a world that has the patterns of absencing and also is enacting these realities of presencing, of co-creating new realities. As leaders, we need to be bilingual. We need to be able to operate in both of these worlds. How do we do that? And I want to end with that. And I want to name you 3 conditions that I believe are at the core of being functional in both of these worlds. The first one, and they deal with 3 things that in current management education and in current leadership education and models are underrated, versus 2 things that are overrated, 3 things that are overrated. The first thing underrated is access your not knowing, which is all about listening and accessing your humility. The second thing that is underrated is accessing your discomfort, leaning into your discomfort. For example, listening to stuff you really don't want to hear. How good are you as a leader to listen to information you don't want to hear? So that is essentially about emotional resilience, about connecting with realities that are challenging, and yet you keep kind of connecting to that. You allow that to talk to you. And we all know that's critical in this current moment to move beyond the edges of our comfort zone. And lastly, the capacity to lean into our non-reactive ways of behaving. Because if we move to action right away, we are just being reactive in a situation. So that is to say, leaning into our capacity of stillness as a gateway to the deeper levels of our creativity. So today, to close with that, you see on the left-hand side 3 things underrated: not knowing, leaning into not knowing, leaning into discomfort, and leaning into non-action, aka stillness. And they need to be rebalanced with the 3 things that are overrated today. Knowledge, because no one knows about the future. There's very important things we don't know about the future. Comfort and action, particularly the talk about action and the reactive patterns. Of course, we are interested in action, but non-action, kind of the capacity to lean into the sources of stillness as the foundation of deep creativity, is, in the age of AI, more important than ever, to allow us to move beyond reactive patterns, which too often we see today. With that, I want to, so that's kind of my little provocation from a systems thinking perspective for the panel conversation that we are going to see now. Thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you, Otto, for setting us up for this panel. I think this was a great meta context on which we can build the panel. A few things that I heard were be the change you want to see, a very well-known phrase, but also leaning into not knowing, discomfort, and non-action, so standing still. That was a lot of information, obviously more from the academic side. And we're now going to ground that conversation into practice, into what we're seeing happening inside organizations. What are they doing to transform? What are they doing to engage their employees? I want to welcome to the stage 3 amazing leaders. I want to start with Sophie Lambin, CEO at Kite Insights. A warm applause, please. Second, Clay Brown from B-Lab Global. Welcome to the stage. And Adrien Casgrain from Longchamp. Welcome. Welcome to the stage, to the 3 of you. I'm going to do a very short intro because we don't have that much time and we want to dive straight into this conversation. So all the way on the right of me is Adrien Casgrain, CSR and Transformation Lead at Longchamp. This is a home game for you. The office of Longchamp is not that far away, based here in Paris. The company is all about durability. It's a family company, so their vision is way longer than I think the next quarter. So that's very interesting. And we have Clay Brown from B-Lab. He just turned into, that's like you're evolving, to Chief Standards Officer at B-Lab. So congratulations on that new role. B-Lab is the mother company of the B Corp certification. So I guess everybody in this room has heard of B Corp, has maybe bought a B Corp brand or worked with a B Corp brand, with a B Corp company. So a very well-known certification. And to my right, we have Sophie Lambin, CEO at Kite Insights. They develop research-based insights, curate compelling events and debates, and design learning content for employees and leaders to really integrate sustainability at the core of the company. Feel free to add upon that if I'm missing something crucial here about these people on the stage. But I want to start right away because we're talking about internal transformation today. And from each of your perspectives, I'm very interested in what do you see as the most important factor in a company that wants to transform to become a sustainable company. So in that transformation, what do you see as the most important factor? I'm going to start right off with you, Adrien. You just became a B Corp as well, so congratulations on that.
Thank you. So for us, I think it was structure, because durability was already, as you said, embedded in our DNA as a family-owned company. But the structure really helped us go the extra mile. The structure helped us set clear targets, set clear goals, and define a roadmap. So it was really, yes, this element helped with the B Corp standards that helped us go to this transformation.
Yeah. So structure, so before that you felt it was all loose parts, and also becoming a B Corp gave it structure then?
Yes, and it also allowed us to give meaning to our clients, but also internal meaning to our employees.
Okay, interesting. And Clay, to reflect on that, also from seeing so many B Corps, I'm curious, what do you see as the most important factor in that transformation?
Yeah, I think it's quite simple, really. It's about making it core business practice and not a communications exercise and not a compliance exercise. Although I say that's simple, it's actually very complicated to do. And one of the things that we do at B Lab is with the B Corp framework is we create a standard, which is a guide for businesses that helps businesses understand how they can go about embedding it into core business practices. And we recently released a new standard that does exactly that. It tries to get it into all corners of the business, not because we want it to be complicated, but because we want it to be effective. And so I think using a framework, whether it's the B Corp framework or some other framework that helps you treat your sustainability as a core business imperative as opposed to a project, I think is essential.
Yeah, so not a side. Do you often see that then? Companies, before they become a B Corp, that it's first a side project, and through the assessment and working on that, it becomes more of a core?
I think so. I think companies are often surprised about what you actually have to do in order to really transform your business. It can't be led from, I mean, we love our chief sustainability officers, but ultimately it needs to be led from the CEO and downward as well.
Yeah, so leadership is essential here.
Yeah. Yes.
So Sophie, what is your reflection on that?
I think for me it's really about the thousands of small decisions and trade-off that people are making every day. That's what is ultimately going to translate a strategy into transformation. And you know, it's the procurement officer making a decision between cost and carbon. It's the marketer making a decision between growth and impact. It's finance person making decision between short-term and long-term. So it's really whether the conditions are in place for people in their jobs making those thousands of small decisions and trade-off every day.
Yeah. So I actually hear if I'm correct in summarizing that, I hear structure, I hear leadership is very important, and also not seeing it as a side project, and the conditions. And I think that touches upon what Otto also said, sort of the support structures. I want to elaborate on that because many companies set ambitious targets, but they struggle to turn them actually into action. There's an implementation gap there. So where does that typically break down inside organizations, Clay?
Yeah, I think we actually did some research with a bunch of B Corps in Benelux, and it was quite consistent what the key challenges were. I think the first one is it was unclear what the mission was sometimes, so why are we doing this? There weren't always internal advocates or leaders who were visible around the topic of transformation that they were trying to undergo. In addition, businesses weren't seen as being transparent about sharing back what were the results of the initiative. So were they achieving their results? Were they not achieving their results? And then ultimately employees not also having time to do it. But I think one of the key things is this results piece and transparency. We had a really interesting example of a B Corp, Ace and Tate. They're an eyewear brand in the Netherlands. And when they announced their B Corp certification, they didn't just do a celebration. They actually did a publication of all the things that they did wrong. So they said, we don't have a supplier sustainability program. We created this amazing bamboo eyewear case that we can't actually recycle, and our net zero targets aren't good enough yet. And so that sort of transparency of leadership, I think, is one of the things that we saw as really being effective in driving internal commitment to the change as well as to making it happen. So transparency of what you're doing well and what you're not doing well as well.
Yeah, and that's what's needed to turn sort of those targets into actual action. Would you want to elaborate on that, Adrien, from Longchamp perspective?
Yes, of course. So for us, it was also the governance that helped us create the link between the leadership and the operating teams. We needed to have a very strong commitment from the leadership to become B Corp, to go through this transformation. But then, the leadership cannot do everything. We also had to implement a lot of projects, and to build that over time, we need a clear governance. We need a clear governance to be able to share information, to have people understand what are the targets, what are the objectives, why we are doing that, apart from the certification, but also what is the deep goal behind that, which is to be more sustainable, to operate a better way, and the governance helps us to create the links between the headquarters in Paris and all people working at Longchamp everywhere in the world, so that they understand the goal, so that they can give it to their teams, so that they can pass it on also to our clients.
Yeah, but that is then also the support structure, as you said, sort of arranging the governance that people can actually act on sustainability targets.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, interesting. And Sophie?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I can build on that. I think it's really a decision-making and a navigation gap. Knowing what to do is not obvious, and it's not a clear improvement action, right? For a lot of employees who are having to make those decisions every day, it's not exactly clear what good looks like. So I think people care deeply. They have the motivation, but I don't think they necessarily have the mandate. And they hesitate because it's risky. It feels risky. And I think the gap is, how do we really give people a sense of agency that it's okay to experiment with these kind of actions, because there's not necessarily a lot of precedence as to what good looks like. So giving people the mandate to experiment, and possibly with that making mistakes along the way.
Yeah, so more of an innovative mindset. I think that also builds upon what Clay said, that there's maybe often not time also for people to experiment and to maybe work differently. That's also, I guess, an elephant in the room. Like, how much agency do employees truly have in these organizations, like on sustainability? Clay, would you want to reflect on that?
Well, I think that employees often want more agency. They communicate that they would like to have more decision-making influence, and they'd like to be part of the conversation. And I think leaders often underestimate the amount of agency that employees actually do have, whether they like it or not. And so some of the stuff that we've been working on is within our new standard as well. We have a section around fair work. And what that requires is that companies actually have a requirement under the new system in order to listen to their employees, and also to report back to them on how they're taking that feedback, what they're doing with it, in order to embed that into kind of their daily dialogue with their employees. So I think the reality is, it's true that employees sometimes are not given the agency in a structured way. But one of the things I think leaders have to continue to recognize is that whether you build the structures around agency or not, the agency is there. And we see that all the time with employee activism and a lot of activities that are happening. And so what I think is important is to build those structures so that you have a way of dealing with it in a systematic way as a leader. It's a more effective way of doing it, as opposed to constantly responding to employee demands or employee criticism that you may not have the opportunity to do it in a more organized way.
Yeah.
Maybe I can build on that. That really relates. I mean, we have data in the same way that Otto referred to that really shows a big disconnect between employees' desire to act on those issues and their ability to act every day. And it seems such a wasted opportunity and energy when there's so much to do. Employers spend a lot of their time trying to engage their employees, and yet that energy is not channeled. And I think there is fear. We hear often employers, rightly so, saying, you know, but what if they come with all these ideas and we don't know what to do with all these ideas? And obviously it's about how you channel that energy, and you know, it's going to spill outside of the organization if you don't channel it inside the organization. But I think there is much more agency that employers sometimes, I think, can appreciate, and it feels certainly somehow wasted as an energy.
Yeah. And I'm curious because, Adrien, you're the one also like working in an organization as a transformational lead. How do you reflect on, the support structures?
So we try to create that. It's not always easy, but I think it's also way more fun, you know, to have real discussions with our employees, to have the ability to get feedbacks. At Longchamp, we try to create these spaces so that employees can come up with their ideas. We have, annual social barometers. We have dedicated trainings where at the end of the training, they are able to share feedback, or ideas that are collected and studied. But in the end, I think that, you know, any employer should want to achieve that, because the relationship, when it goes both ways, it's much more interesting. At Longchamp, we have also, quite short chain of commands. So the ability to go to the top management quite easily. I can only speak for my company, of course, but I think also it helps a lot being able to go to the top manager saying, you know, I have this idea that could be studied.
Yeah, and I'm just curious, do you think transformation is easier in a family-owned company?
It's different.
It's different.
It's different because, we really see over the long run. I know that I'm here not, for a specific project, but I'm here for the many years to come in my professional career.
Yeah.
So the perspective changes completely. The idea is not to be able to achieve a specific project by the end of the quarter. The idea is really to do things right, to build over time, so that, we are still there as a company in 10 years, but also in 20 or 50 years.
Yeah. I think more companies should think like family-owned companies do. Sophie?
Yeah, I just wanted to refer to the recent research of the Edelman Trust Barometer. I think that really highlight an interesting dynamic in saying that in a world of extreme polarization, employers are actually the most trusted institution by citizens, more so than media, government, and even the scientific community. So for me, this really points to a huge opportunity and responsibility of businesses to really unlock and unleash the power of citizens who are also employees within the organization. But that data set for me was another validation of the importance of the work environment as a place for unlocking the potential of people to act on those issues.
Yeah, interesting. Thanks for sharing that. Always good to have some numbers as well here on stage. And also another elephant in the room, I would say, also maybe for sustainability managers sitting in the room wanting to get sustainability at the core of their company. Often we're working in companies where there's also commercial targets, and they obviously can interfere with maybe sustainability targets. If we look at that dynamic, what do you think is a good intervention to go about creating a sustainability aligned culture if you always have that sort of push and pull between those targets, I would say? Clay,
I'll maybe push back a little bit. I'm not. Yeah. We don't really see that trade-off as often as we used to. I think what we see is that most businesses are actually sticking to their sustainability commitments, and actually many of them are going further. I think, speaking of numbers, I think Harvard Business Review had a recent research that said something like 53% of businesses are staying the course with their commitments, and another 35% are actually going further. I think what we're seeing, though, is sort of a little bit of a worrying trend, which is what we refer to sometimes as green hushing. So these are where businesses are doing the things, but they're not willing to talk about it. And there's two real drivers that I think you see in the United States, for example, antitrust lawsuits and things that are putting pressure on sustainability initiatives, which are requiring companies to sort of scale back a little bit in what they're saying publicly. And then in Europe, you have the Green Claims Directive and you have anti-greenwashing laws that are also driving companies to be quite cautious about what they're saying. And I think that's having an impact on kind of internal transformations as well, because what it leads to is a bit of a cognitive dissonance. So if companies are actually driving sustainability initiatives within inside their business, but they're not willing to talk about them externally in the same way as they may be used to, what that creates is a really confusing message, both from a brand point of view as well as to your employees. And so I think we're not seeing as much of this sort of tension between profit and sustainability like we may be used to see.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's not a reality in some businesses, having to make very difficult choices about what to prioritize and what not to prioritize. But I think this green hushing is an issue. And I'll just do a quick plug. We're going to be in the Crystal Bubble releasing a new report called our Green Shouting Guide, which we developed in partnership with the B Corp Nice and Serious and Creatives for Climate. And it's really helping companies navigate this space. How do you talk about sustainability in this sort of polarized world where you have to be very cautious about greenwashing? But I think it also helps you with your employees and driving some of these internal transformations as well.
Okay, so go see that if you want some practical tools. Nice. And I was wondering also then from your perspective, working with so many companies, advising a lot of companies, I guess in that sense, do you see that trade-off to be made, and how do you help organizations to get that sustainability-aligned culture?
Yeah, I think I agree that there's less of a trade-off between profitability and sustainability at a strategic level. Where that trade-off manifests itself is in everyday decisions. Because when you trickle that down to the reality of every role, I think neither employees nor leaders are necessarily very well trained in the art of making decisions when both outcomes are not great. And I think that's a real muscle that we all need to build to continue to make decisions despite the trade-offs, despite the dilemma, and to build that capacity and that muscle, I would say. And that's where we see a lot of practice needed, training needed, confidence building needed, but also a permission from leadership to employees to make those decisions, some of which have never been made before.
Yeah. So you now feel that people are still holding back and not daring to make certain decisions on sustainability. What would be an example of that?
Yeah, I think there is still a lot of, people are very tentative, hesitant. I think what we see happening that is driving a sense of agency about people's ability to make decisions is people having, for example, sustainability KPI in their roles. When that becomes, companies like Train Technologies or Prudential, for example, every single role in the company has a KPI for sustainability, which means that gives them a real mandate to make those decisions, to use their best judgment, to make those decisions. But unless that happens, I think it stays at the level of strategy and it doesn't trickle down in the organization.
Yeah, so that's also how you then measure success, so it really embedded in that core. How do you do that at Longchamp, Adrien?
This is how we do it, in fact.
That's how you do it?
Yes. No, the idea is really, to embed sustainability into the company culture. We have our brand book that defines who we are as a company. And then we have to create as many links as possible with, sustainability. To make people understand that, this is not a side topic, as said before. This is something that is really core to our operations. And also an important thing is, of course, we have a CSR team at Longchamp, But the idea is really to have this topic that is pushed to all teams within the company. The CSR team is responsible for organizing that. Is responsible for helping set the goals, the direction, but then the execution is, the job of each individual team. And we have to make that very clear. We have also to create discussion spaces so that we can set the targets, we can launch projects, but we can also give feedbacks. We can build real discussions with every teams in the company to make sure that they are, parts of the same story, that they are, that they understand the big picture of what we're trying to do.
And that big picture, do you feel people now, I think you've been a B Corp for a month now, maybe a bit longer. Do you feel that people are, like employees are more engaged now?
Yes, of course, there is a better sense of belonging. We had maybe more than 100 people directly participating to that project. Of course, they're very proud of what we've collectively achieved. And the collective part is also very important. It's not just one team, a few people working in a remote office. It's a general story. It's something that we built together. And the collective that we built is very important.
Yeah.
To build positive energy, yes.
Yeah, nice. And 100 people, I guess that's everybody playing their role in their own expertise.
Yes, exactly.
And working on sustainability. Clay, you interact with a lot of B Corps, and I'm interested. What differentiates these companies from non-B Corps? What do you see?
I mean, I think a lot of the stuff we've talked about on stage. I mean, the B Corps have a framework that they use inside their business that gives them a common language to talk about these things, right? There's a lot of the vocabulary around these topics are often new to people, and the B Corp framework gives a common language. It gives sort of a guide for how you can embed these types of practices throughout the entire business. And I think what Adrian was saying is really important. You engage everyone in the business. So the largest example we have is Danone, who I'm sure they might be in the room today. They're the world's...
They're in the back. Hi, Danone.
And they've recently completed their global group certification, which actually consisted of 200 individual Danone entities in 60 countries with 90,000 employees. And so across that entire journey of 10 years, they had to engage every employee, every business entity on this journey. And I think that alone creates a different type of company culture. It creates a culture that is treating this not as a side project, but as a core element of the business. And so I think that really does differentiate it, because every B Corps are all different, but one thing they have in common is sort of that deep cultural alignment with the purpose of what the business is trying to do, and that's lived throughout all the employees as well.
Yeah, interesting. And also looking at the time, we're going to round up a bit. I just want to focus on, you've worked with so many companies, and I also just want to touch upon, are there any practical approaches that you tend to see successful? You also created Herd, which is an app to engage employees around sustainability topics. I'm just curious to tap a bit more into concrete approaches.
Yeah, well, thank you for the plug. Herd is a completely free, philanthropically funded platform for any employees that cares about these issues and looking for tools, resources, the support structure that Otto was talking about. It's really trying to democratize action, if you will. But yeah, I think there's many key levers to action. But I think meeting people where they're at, it's not one size fits all. And really acknowledging that people are just, as René Lutzman, a climate psychologist, says, they are not just empty vessels waiting to be filled with information. We need to recognize that people carry a lot of anxiety around this climate crisis and the sustainability agenda, also ambivalence. They feel pulled in lots of different directions. And René talks also about aspiration. So recognizing that emotional landscape and not seeing the engagement of employees around sustainability just as a education exercise. That there's many human and emotional dimensions at stake. I think that's really important as the first thing. The second thing I would say, make sustainability role specific. This is really where action happens, and giving people the specificity of what they can do in their role. And thirdly, I would say, give people the chance to take actions. There's this great researcher called Chris de Meyer who says it is not belief or values that make people act on those issues, is the ability to act itself. So create the condition for people to explore, to experiment, and to interact with each other as a key enabler of action. These are my top 3.
Thank you. I think that was also a great ending to this, I would think, way too short conversation. I heard about also the support structures, as you said, making it very specific to people, their role within their expertise, KPIs. So as Adrien also talked about, it's also about the governance, how we're going to manage this. But as Clay touched upon, the B Corps that really have it as a central culture, a story that everybody can build on. I want to welcome you, thank you all 3 for this conversation.
Thank you.
And we're going to close off with Jolana. So thank you for the panel.
Thank you, buddy.
Thank you. So again, thank you to these 3 amazing speakers, Kite Insights, Longchamp, and B-Lab, for all these practical insights into employee engagement and internal transformation. So we've talked about how to drive change in organizations, and now I'd like to zoom in on the people actually making that change. Who are those change makers internally, and what do they need? I want to welcome to the stage Jolana Amara, CEO at League of Intrapreneurs.
Thank you, Bodhi.
Welcome. So, Jolana, I'm really curious. You've obviously listened to Otto, you've listened to the panel. I'm just curious to shortly reflect with you on this. What stuck most with you of what you've heard?
Yeah, I think it's mostly the agency, and I was going to talk about it later today, but I think a lot about how we've become complacent because everything is sort of served to us in a way, at least in the UK where I live. The roads are being taken care of. Well, we would probably argue that sometimes, but I come from a village where our local women and men would volunteer and train to become firemen, firearms women or men. And we would come together collectively to tend to what the village needed. And so we had an agency to really step in and take care of our village. We were the villagers. And I feel that we've lost the concept of being the villagers and forgotten on, how to be villagers. And so I love the idea of claiming our agency. And that's kind of what stuck with me throughout the conversations, because as Clay said, right, we have the agency. The agency is there. So we got to claim it.
We got to claim it. And I think that also obviously is connected to the work that you do at the League of Intrapreneurs. I didn't really know what an intrapreneur was, so I want to give Jolana the space to explain to us what the League of Intrapreneurs does.
Yeah, thank you. So first of all, we are a community of intrapreneurs, first and leading community of intrapreneurs. And we believe in the potential of human beings. And really looking into how do we unlock that capital inside of our large organizations. Our work really lies within the area of empowering individuals to claim their agency inside of the organizations, but also to help organizations create the environments, enabling environments for their internal change makers to claim their agency and be the villagers in a way. And so we we sort of work in 3 areas. We call it the Intrapreneur Academy, which focuses on the internal support of organizations and their structures, but also we create program journeys that support the capacity of individuals that are innovating from inside. We also work on this sort of advancing of the field of intrapreneurship, if you will, and that's through development of tools that we have developed and are continuously developing with intrapreneurs, for intrapreneurs and for internal change making, and also sort of giving spotlight to the success stories out there that we can all learn from through our annual flagship event, Global Intrapreneur Week. And lastly, just to finish on that line, we're also advancing the collective field, so inspiring collective action, and that's the program that we are launching just in 2 weeks. That's bringing intrapreneurs together across organizations, across different areas at the intersection of climate, equity, and technology. And really here we are looking at inspiring entrepreneurs across organizations to start collaborating together so that the efforts don't stay isolated within one organization, but perhaps move a little bit across. And I have to put a little plug there because I promised Antonia that I would share that we have secured 5 spots for Change Now participants. So if anybody is interested in joining us in 2 weeks at this 9-month journey, please let us know very quickly because we are already closing the cohort.
So what would be the profile then from somebody that joins? Like what kind of company do you have to work at? Like is there a specific work that you have to do as a professional, or?
You gotta be an intrapreneur inside of an organization. That's one requisite. But then working on something that's really at the intersection of climate, equity, or tech. Can be touching on one of these topics or in mixture of 2 or 3. And it's really about the willingness, I think, to collaborate and find pathways where collaboration can take place.
And just to reflect shortly then on what an intrapreneur is, like is that, well, I'm not going to fill it in, obviously, but I have a lot of thoughts about what an entrepreneur could be. But how do you see that role?
So intrapreneur, the short term really is an employee inside of an organization innovating from within. So really working with the resources of the organization. And in our context, an intrapreneur sits at the intersection of sort of, like the ikigai circles. So of what I am passionate about, what my business is passionate about, or what the business's mission is, and what a society need is. So an intrapreneur is someone who can listen very deeply to the conditions around them and be able to sort of bridge sort of what we've heard from Otto about the emerging system, and so they're able to really bridge what the old system is from the old system to the new system.
Yeah. But I guess it can also be challenging to be an entrepreneur. So I was wondering, like, if you work in a corporate setting, for example, and you want to create change as an entrepreneur, like, what is sort of preventing people from making that change? Like, what are obstacles for entrepreneurs?
Well, I think we heard a lot about the sort of internal structures, and I would say that that's the biggest challenge, really, that organizations often see entrepreneurs as people who are too idealistic, too far from the commercial targets. But really, the benefit or the huge advantage of supporting or enabling, empowering entrepreneurs inside of your organization is that they are these listeners who can see, they can see sort of, what can be done, and they can see the risks of not taking action. And so entrepreneurs really having enabling structures, yes, really helpful. But then as an entrepreneur, if my organization doesn't have those structures in place, then it's again back to the taking agency, claiming that agency, and creating a community, grassroots community. We see that a lot across organizations where entrepreneurs are just reaching to the other intrapreneurs or other, sort of system stewards inside who want to put their mind, heart, and hands together, and connecting in community, finding it for themselves. I think that's also one way.
And interesting, and just to make it a bit more lively as well for the people in the crowd, like what would it look like if an entrepreneur is successful? Like what have you seen happen through entrepreneurs in these organizations?
I would love to give an example of Thais Vojvodovic from, well, she at the moment works for coastal nations, but she used to work at Coca-Cola. She was in very junior position in Coca-Cola, and Coca-Cola Brazil specifically, and she noticed that a lot of their competitors, as well as Coca-Cola, were struggling with their recycling issue. And she connected with intrapreneurs across different organizations, competing organizations, and in the end, through the support of her management, she was able to create a coalition that brought together 10 competitive organizations to work together to solve the recycling issue collectively, which meant that they managed to save enormous amount of resources and energy and money.
Wow. And are there, so I hear there that there has to be support from their managers, obviously. And because I feel that that's a bit of an elephant in the room. We're talking a lot about employee engagement, bottom-up change, but we also see, obviously, the needed role of leadership here. Do you think bottom-up change is even possible when leadership is not on board?
Yeah, it goes back really to the enabling conditions, and the ideal scenario is when we have top-down support of bottom-up leadership. And when you think of it, the world, even just in our lifetime, has changed so enormously. It's such a different place from when we were growing up, so the leadership structures in our organizations need to change as well. We can't sort of approach the world, the fast-moving world, with the same old leadership structures as we've always done. And so to innovate within our understanding of leadership actually means, I think that's where sort of the work needs to happen, and really, and then the ideal scenario is the top-down support of the bottom-up leadership and spreading it and really enabling people to claim their agency and tapping into that capital of their.
There would be a lovely, obviously, effect of an entrepreneur also influencing how leaders lead. I guess that would also be interesting.
Exactly.
And also looking at leaders. If there's leaders here in the room who want to have more entrepreneurs, or at least support more entrepreneurs in their organization, what would be a first concrete step they can take?
If I'm a leader who wants to
if you want to support your entrepreneurs. I mean, there's obviously within big corporates, there's many people who want change, but maybe that fades out a bit when they don't have the support.
Yeah, so I think it's a lot about listening and also lifting up people who come with ideas. We're working with a lot of organizations that are interested exactly in that. So currently we're working with Philips, for instance, who are really interested in how their employees could support their sustainability agenda. And it's beautiful to see sort of. It's about culture, basically. Culture and community, bringing people into what Clay was referring that B Corps do, right? The collective language, the language that people can share, and visibility. And so what we are seeing a lot is that impact already happens. A lot of organizations, even without the structures, have grassroots employee initiatives that are already doing quite good work on ground. And so I think visibility, creating structures that can connect these grassroots initiatives are going to benefit every organization, especially because what we are seeing is that oftentimes there is a lot of duplication, and perhaps, people could share resources if there is more visibility, for sure. And then
Is that also what you're trying to, as a League of Entrepreneurs, as you said, bringing people together? So not only, not only empowering people in their organizations, but also creating a collective of entrepreneurs?
Exactly, because I think that change is relational. Change is about connection. And so creating sort of community, bringing people in community into the village, again, if I bring back my analogy from the beginning, is how we can help employees to, create a space where I feel I belong here. I feel I have, I am listened to. I feel I have others who I can consult and talk to about the thoughts that are running through my mind or the project that I'm trying to drive from the side of my desk.
Yeah. Did you actually start as an entrepreneur yourself?
I haven't actually. So I have started because I personally, I think a lot about the meaning of life since I'm a very little child. And for me, meaning of life has really become about being in service. And I love to be in service of helping others claim their agency and be villagers. I love the sort of regenerative principles of not sort of running into action, but creating enabling environments for change to happen, for the emergence of what wants to become, in a way.
Yeah.
And in that sense, we are little like system stewards, where we become the vessels that sort of enable change to take place, and sort of remove the coloniality of stepping into action and imposing solutions into our system. Instead, we are listening and observing to what those solutions should be or what they are becoming, and creating the right conditions for that to happen. And so that's kind of how I got into this work, because I love the idea that intrapreneurs are system stewards, that they are the listeners that sit inside of their organizations, and because of being in the sort of mid-management levels, or, well, anywhere across the organization, they really are able to see what is needed, and they're close enough to the customers to also listen to what they need, to know what they need. And so it just really, really struck me as something that I wanted to support.
Yeah. And as you said, sort of the antennas for change, like these entrepreneurs are throughout the organization, seeing what needs to change. And I'm curious, if there's somebody in the room here that wants to have a bigger impact in their organization, work like an entrepreneur, what would you say to that person? That's actually my question to you. As in, if they don't feel that they have the permission, if they don't feel they have the power to change something, like what would be advice you would give them?
So I was talking earlier about the sort of ikigai of my passion, the organizational sort of mission or strategy, and the society need. That's how you can come up with an idea that makes sense to your organization. Because often entrepreneurs are being criticized for being too idealistic, too far from commercial, or too long term. So if I can find the right sweet spot, we call it a sweet spot for entrepreneurship, then that idea will likely make sense for the organization. And then what needs to happen is making sure that we can communicate about it. So storytelling and being a good storyteller is a huge part of being an entrepreneur, bringing others along. And so talk about your idea. Talk about the things you are seeing and the things that you feel are calling for that emergence, change, right?
Yeah.
and create a little bit of a personal brand, I would say, where people build.
That people recognize
They
you
know.
for,
Oh,
she's the one
exactly.
working on.
Yeah, we have a lot of intrapreneurs in our community that have even for 10 years have been driving sort of this idea, and there was not much of a yes and green light, run with it. And so it was this thing on the side of their desk. But then when the world changed and what they were sort of pointing at suddenly became a norm or a trend, the timing is a really good thing, actually. They were able to perhaps even create their own jobs and new departments. And
so a personal brand, being more entrepreneurial, getting yourself out there, maybe just taking a stance in a company where maybe you would normally go with the flow.
Exactly, and be relational about it, really. Like, talk to people and don't worry about talking to anyone on any level, to the senior leaders, to the more junior people. Really create a community around you in a way that or a little bit of a noise around you, where people know that's what you stand for. Yeah.
Trying to change.
Exactly.
Well, thank you, Jolana. We're already through our time together. I think this was a very nice sort of concrete ending of this session to make it very specific how people in their organization can drive change. So I want to welcome you. I guess welcome you. Thank you. And welcome you as well. Thank you, and we're going to wrap up this session.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Warm applause for Jolana. So we started with Otto Scharmer, giving us actually, a big of a context to have this conversation with all these leaders about internal transformation. And then it's not only about strategy. It's about creating the conditions in which people can thrive. So from governance to the stories on sustainability, what are we trying to accomplish as a company? If that is not clear, it's hard for people to connect to that mission. Everybody here is obviously from very different organizations, so I hope you all gained a bit that you can sort of think about throughout the day today. And I think my takeaway was as well from this, make it a personal brand, be entrepreneurial. I think when we work inside big organizations, we just go with the flow of that organization, but we all have more agency than we think. I want to welcome you all for joining this session, and I will see you out there. Thanks a lot.